I'm not one of them mainstream cunts, I'm that one full of pain and love.
Okay, so what is your opinions about gender politics, and what's your thing about gender politics?
So I personally am non-binary, so I use they them pronouns. But like we were talking about neo-pronouns, which I think for a cis person or maybe like a trans-binary person, it would be kind of hard to understand neo-pronouns. Like my friend Spencer uses fleurs pronouns, which it's like a bit hard to understand, especially like for me at first. I was like, how do you use fleur in a sentence? It doesn't really make sense to me. But I think if you look at it as like they as well, they to some people can't be used in a singular pronoun. But if you really like do your research and you ask questions in a nice way, you know, like, hey buddy, they, how does that work? You know, if you just ask questions and you be respectful about it, it's really easy to understand and to learn about that type of thing.
Oh, cool, Vince, man. What's your opinion?
I personally think they should identify with whatever gender they want to. There's a lot of discussion within, like, especially the trans community, in regards to, like, in a sense, how people should identify. I personally think as long as it doesn't harm another person, do what you want. Identify as you want, because the thing is, if you feel that way, then you should be able to express that. You should be able to feel that way. And it's a similar thing with like neo-pronouns. They're difficult for me to understand because I personally don't use them. I haven't met many other people who use them, but I'm still going to respect the person as they are a person. They haven't done anything bad to me, and I have to show respect as much as I can about their identity. The same as I would with anyone who is a person of color, the same as I would with no matter what gender they are or anything like that.
Yeah, cool beans. Okay, all right, so in terms of gender politics, all right, there's this whole argument between, say, for example, you know, the whole gender dysmorphia thing where, you know, people can say, oh, I'm female and be, you know, biologically male or whatever it is, right? And a lot of people say that gender is, you know, somewhat, it's more of a behavioral thing than it is an actual biological thing, right? That being said, the DNA structure is both feminine and masculine, right? So, hypothetically, this is my theory. So hypothetically, if someone is non-binary, right, they register that they're both, but they can kind of recognize that they don't identify with one, right? So that would be, in my opinion, the third gender. But at the same time, I think it should stop there as the third. I don't think you can make up more than 3 genders, in my opinion. That being said, I want to know your opinion on that.
Well, I think it's really hard, especially with Tumblr as a thing. If you look at the history of gender on Tumblr, people make up anything to have a gender. Which then, because of that, people like myself, who are non-binary, won't get taken seriously. Because they'll look at bullshit online and be like, oh, you identify as a attack helicopter, you know, lol, funny. It's an insult and people don't take it seriously. But, you know, again, if you do research about it.
Yeah, the other thing with it is a lot of the time, in some sense, I do agree with you that there are, in a sense, 3 genders, but most identifying factors that aren't the binary male or female, most of them fall under the non-binary character. So most of them will fall under non-binary. Something like demi-girl or demi-boy. Since non-binary, if you see it as a spectrum, so like male on this side and female on this side, non-binary is the whole middle spectrum. You could be right in the middle, or you could be like 75% towards male and 25% towards female, or anywhere in between. Or you can just not feel like you should. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like sense where you could feel you would be non-binary, but you can also have an additional term to identify as in that way, so you feel more you feel more comfortable with yourselves, because some people they don't feel like they're just right smack bang in the middle. Some people feel towards more male, some people feel towards more female. It really depends on them. So in a sense, I do agree with you that there are, in a sense, 3 genders, but I do believe that most genders that people have identified with that aren't male or female fall under the non-binary category. It's an umbrella term. It's like the
it's like a spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the word gay. If someone says they're gay, they could just mean that they're attracted to only males while they're a male, but they could just mean that they're queer. So they're somewhere, they're attracted to who knows what, that isn't straight. Do you know what I mean?
So this is another thing too, right? Okay, so this is something, because I'm not like, you know, I find attraction with the same sex sometimes, you know what I mean? But I'd consider myself as a heterosexual, right?
Yeah.
That being said, right, I've never really gotten the difference between bi and pan and gay and queer, right? Because there's a huge gap. I assume like you guys would know more than I would about this subject, but at the same time, I know that with pan, it doesn't really matter. You love the person for who they are, right? But with bi, it means that you're attracted and you identify with that attraction with both genders, right? But with queer and gay, I'm unclear about, so I don't know.
So with bi, usually people will use bi as in they're attracted to two genders. That doesn't necessarily mean male and female. That can mean non-binary people and males. That can be non-binary people and females. That can be male and female. It's more of a bi means two genders. But also some people can identify it as it's been a word that's used a lot longer than pansexual with I'm attracted to anybody. So there is a bit of a middle ground there that a lot of people are confused by, even people who identify it as themselves. Whereas with queer and gay, queer is a reclaimed slur. Gay was originally as well, because gay, the original meanings of gay was a bundle of sticks.
Or happy.
Yeah, or happy, exactly. Whereas queer was a slur from the start. People are now starting to identify as queer because it's an umbrella term. It doesn't mean that you specifically identify with this, and this. You're not attracted to this, and this exactly. You're just attracted to certain people, and you don't have to elaborate on that. So personally, I identify as queer, as I don't know my attraction 100%. I could be attracted to girls, but I don't know 100%.
There's also asexual as well.
Yeah, asexuality is just none. That's just no sexual attraction as well. But yeah, the difference between gay and queer is gay can be used as an umbrella term to mean you're attracted to the same gender, but it's usually referring to homosexuality. Whereas the term queer just means you're attracted to other people, but you're not straight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool beans, man. Cool beans. Do you have any different opinions about that?
No, it was the same as Alec.
All right,
What is
awesome.
Pansexual just means you're attracted to anybody, whereas bisexual generally refers to people that are attracted to two genders or more.
Yeah, so like someone who identifies with it and someone who doesn't identify with it.
Kind of question I'll pose to you guys, which is we're talking about cisgender, right? This is just my theory, and again, if any of you are non-binary or whatever, no offense to anyone, okay? But my opinion is like, okay, there's two sexes, yeah? Male and female, right? And the genetic code of DNA is both male and female. That's why it has the two snakes, right?
There are sets of chromosomes compared to belonging sexes. I think there are 4 variations of chromosomes.
So chromosomes are essentially what? Hormones, right?
No, chromosomes are genetic, so it's genetic material that is wrapped around things called, I think, cystones that form, obviously, the shape like that. So that's just DNA and genetic material. It's not hormones. It can obviously affect what hormones are produced in the body, but I think there's 4 variations of them. So some people are born with...
in all technicality, it would be 4 genders. Is that what you said?
So there's sets of chromosomes. Genders.
That's assuming
Gender
based
is
gender.
a societal construct. There are obviously society groups people by sexes, but gender is something that can be fluid, and it's something that society uses to base.
See, this is where I was getting to my point, right? And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's alright.
On this thing. But the way that I figured it, right? If the DNA code is both male and female, whether you were born biological male or biological female, right? The gender in your mind could be interchangeable with both, right? Meaning like say for example, my version of non-binary or gender fluid would be both masculine and feminine, but I don't identify with either one, right? That's the way I figured it. But at the same time, if you say that there's 5,000 genders and I have to call you cis
fucking A, B, C, D, fucking whatever. That makes no sense to me.
Well, cis
you know?
presumes that someone identifies with how they were born.
Yep.
So, with their sex assigned at birth.
I think the thing with that, with having like a whole 5,000 genders, I think, that's
they're having the same thing with race now. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm black, so I'm gonna refer to you, call me as a black man now.
yeah.
You know what I mean? That sounds ridiculous. But if I say, hey, I prefer you call me her from now on, that's socially acceptable. If I say I prefer to be called black from now on, that's socially discrimination, right? Which is confusing as shit.
Yeah, the whole 5,000 genders thing. You'll notice a lot of the people who say that are young people who are very confused about their identity. It's very much they're trying to work out what they're comfortable with. So they obsess over one little thing that later on they realize, well, I was fucking stupid. You'll notice a lot of people identify with what are commonly seen as the binary terms for gender, which is he and she. That's usually the things people identify with, even if it doesn't match their biological sexes, which are he and she. So anyone who's really thought about their gender usually end up on that course of going towards either he or she or even they, and that's usually where it ends. But I don't feel like saying all further identities of beyond he and she are invalid just because most of the people who are identifying as something other than their own sexes, I think we should keep in mind that languages change. Languages change with every civilization, with every age. Neo-pronouns, the whole Z-zer type thing,
It's what people are comfortable with.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If it's something that enough people are comfortable with, it's going to become normal as well. And changing normalities is fine. That's society. That's growth of human beings. So, like for now, I do think it's a little bit weird. The whole you have to pronounce my pronouns with an X in front of it. I think that's weird. But that's going to change in the next 20 years or so. People will be like all over the place, like, my pronouns are Caesar, and that's something that's just going to happen. If you're not comfortable with it, if you don't get comfortable with it at some point, it doesn't really matter. People still going to identify with
Here's
it.
another question, right? If you're a non-gender binary, right?
Yeah.
And considering that sexuality is based on your sex, right? So hypothetically, right? So if you're a girl and you date another girl, you're a lesbian, right?
Yeah.
If you're a guy, you date another guy, you're a gay. If you're a guy and you date a girl, you're an heterosexual, right? So if you're a non-gender binary, right? Does that make you pan if you date either one?
So pan is defined as not having, wrong words. It's attraction to any gender.
Yep.
So it's a category that falls under.
It's not bisexual because you don't identify with either sex.
So bisexual is two or more. So like for example, if someone is bilingual, doesn't mean there are only two languages in the world. It means that means what they speak. So for example, there are people who are bi that might have a preference towards women and non-binaries, or men, women and non-binaries. It doesn't matter. It depends what label people feel comfortable with. So it's very much how people feel comfortable with their pronouns. Like I identify as asexual because at the end of the day, if I don't have sex, I'm not gonna die over it. It's
Wait,
not
does
fair.
that, okay, if you don't have sex, you're going to die over it, or does it mean like you don't feel like you don't have a sex drive? Like that's mainly the broad spectrum of asexuals, like I don't have a sex drive.
So there are asexuals who are completely sex repulsed, and there are it's a spectrum. So there are asexuals that are okay with there are asexuals that masturbate. It's the sexual, I guess, desire. So there's the lack of that for some people, and there's some people who just don't want it with other people. It's very much fluid and it's very much spectrum. Nothing's black and white. It's very much, I guess, you can go as a grayscale. It changes. It's different. It can change.
It's a
from-
spectrum,
Yes.
right?
But yeah, that's the same with gender. Everything, I guess, at the end of the day, is a spectrum. Nothing is black and white, and everything is changing. Things are becoming more, I guess, normalized, and it's helping people find who they are.
Alright, well, before I leave you guys, do you have any wise words to say to anyone that's maybe suffering from identity crisis, or maybe someone who needs help in finding themselves?
If you're a kid, don't label yourself too early. Wait. That's like, it's something I wish I knew earlier on. Don't follow any path that's offered to you, but any old one that comes along first, because you might go down the wrong one. Wait it out, see who you really are before you make any big decisions. Something like gender identity, sexuality, it's something that can evolve and adapt over time. Give it time, find out who you are before you make a decision about who you are.
And it's okay to change labels if you do decide, hey, I'm bi, and then you're like, maybe actually I'm either gay or lesbian. At the end of the day, to change your labels, it's okay. It doesn't define you as a person. It should just be something that you want to use to tell people. Like, for example, I just say I'm queer because it's easier than explaining to people different things. It's just like, okay, so...
Yeah. So,
choose the one label than rather you specific.
Don't label yourself unless you're comfortable, and also throw little people. Throw little people. If someone's shorter than you, pick them up and throw them.
You heard it here first. Throw the little
That's in a
people.
mosh pit.
Oh, that
That's
actually
in a mosh
sounds
pit.
ableist now.
Of gender politics.
Gender.
Politics. So like what we were talking about before, and non-gender binaries and all that shit. Like, what is your views?
I think it's okay. Like, I don't care what people do. It's just very hard to understand for people that it's not really talked about of how to understand that, and I get confused with how it all works.
Yeah.
And what I feel like they all want to be called something else. Like, they all have their own ways of explaining it. So I feel like there's no common understanding of it. I don't know how to explain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
So do you think like as we progress through the ages, you know, like, I mean, it's becoming more normalized,
yeah.
you know, in terms of sexuality and gender, and being more politically correct with those things. Do you think in the future somewhat be more widely accepted, or do you think like it's always going to be just like some form of stigma behind it?
I don't think there'll be. I feel like the younger generation it'll continue to be accepted. Because I feel like I can even now I can see it getting more and more accepted. Like, it's becoming more normal.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll change, but it matters too, because like sometimes people learn off their parents and go what. So there's always going to be hate no matter what, because this world there's always going to be hate with things. But I feel like it's becoming more accepted in our world.
So you yourself, like when you came out, were your parents don't give a shit, or were they really like?
My parents, I was lucky they didn't give a shit
Yeah.
at all. And my school was like, everyone at school was really good.
Was anyone like, oh, I kind of knew anyway?
Yeah, a lot of people were.
Yeah.
It was kind of obvious, but like, I feel like I come out of like a good time. Like, it started to become more common. But I've noticed it's easier for people now than what it was, because I had friends that had struggles because they're a lot older than me.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier now than what it was a couple of years ago.
Do you think dating a woman as a woman is easier than dating a woman as a man? Like, because I feel like, and this is my point of view. I feel like as a man, I can't emotionally relate to the women that I'm with.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like because you're a woman, you just experience similar things. So
I feel like for me, women with like two women will always connect a lot better. I don't know, they've just got similarities. Like, it's just and they understand each other a lot better.
Yeah,
where I feel like a man, like both ways, for a man it's harder with a girl. And I don't know about that, but like it's harder for girls with boys.
yeah, especially with vulnerability and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean, like
A lot of women are very self-conscious. Also men in their own ways, but women will struggle with that a lot with men. I found it hard when I was dating men. Yeah.
What, not relating to them on an emotional level, or
Just not relating to them, and I don't think they understood me as well as what like girls would.
yeah.
But I've mainly been with girls, so it's hard to like answer that question fully. But
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I find it easier with girls because I can relate to them a lot easier.
This whole idea of no gender is normal now. You know, like
Yeah.
like men are more feminine these days than I'd say in the 50s, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, like it's irony because of history. Like if you're in the 1800s or something, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
being gay was like widely
That was,
accepted.
like,
And then
yeah.
it 40s or 1920s it was like, oh, this is a fucking mental condition, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're
same as
putting them in
trans people.
psych wards and
Yeah.
stuff.
it's-
Like, I feel like they go
really
through phases, but I don't think it'll change. I feel like it's going to be really accepted now. I feel like we're becoming more accepting of a lot of things. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion.
So-
There will always be criticism no matter what.
There's always going to be hate, and there's always going to be people that hate certain things, but that's just how the world goes.
Do you think there's such thing as transracial?
Transracial, I mean biracial.
No, transracial, meaning like you could be born white like me and think that I'm Chinese and refer to people call me as a Chinese, you know? Because that's how that's because there's stigmatization
I think
with the trans community, and now it's
It's like me as
trans-racial,
well, right?
trans species. It's a
My
it's
parents,
a
they were from Somalia. My mom
spectrum.
was from down.
transracial, I can't agree with that. Like, I don't think you can say, like, if it's becoming of like a culture, like you stick with your culture, because I've got some, like, I'm from, my family are from the Netherlands, like I'm Dutch.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go around saying like I'm from another place. Like, you should be proud of where you come from no matter what. And it doesn't matter like what that country's done now, that's your like origin and that's where you're from. And I think you should just accept that. Like, it's not hard.
Well, that's the thing. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Is because like most of the trans community is based on how I feel, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, if how I feel is differently racially, what is there more stick? Do you know what I mean? Like
I feel
in
like
terms
you
of
can-
like, there's always going to be something new that's different.
Yeah.
So if that's the new movement that happens, you
I don't
know what I
know,
mean?
like there's boundaries with it. It matters how far they go with that topic, because it can become very disrespectful in certain ways if they're not careful.
That's my first time hearing that.
Yeah, well, it's like, say if like there's like a couple people I've seen that are like white and they try to say they're from Africa, they don't
Bloodline.
no bloodline. Like that, I don't find that
You
okay.
can't see the bloodlines.
No, they don't have any and they can't prove that they've got any. Like, they literally, like there's people out there that don't have any at all and say it. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with it either.
I don't agree with that.
Absolutely wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
It's wrong. It's not right at all. Full stop.
I mean, I could see how, for example, maybe two parents that have like IVF
Yeah.
operation, where maybe two parents are black or white or whatever race,
Well, if they're
and they make their kids look something else, maybe
Yeah.
that's probably that person. If they explain it like that, then I'll be like, oh, yeah, I understand.
yeah,
But they just sound black.
there's boundaries to that topic, and because I don't really know it, I can't go into it, but I just don't find that right.
Of wisdom to anyone that's struggling with possibly identity or, you know, sexuality. Like,
Yep. Okay. Okay. Just let me think about it for a sec.
Yeah.
I just think go for it and be who you are, and like it'll all pass through. If people don't like you for what you want to be, then let those people go because they're toxic. Like, if they can't accept you, then that's their loss, because you're like, everyone's a great person, especially for being who you are, no matter what. That's it. Just be who you are and don't worry about what people think.
asking a lot of people questions when it comes to gender and awareness about identity and stuff like that. So tell us your experience with gender and identity and stuff.
So my gender identity is transgender female. I don't present that way due to fear of my safety. There's a lot of hate towards trans women and, well, women in general. 97 to 99% of women have experienced sexual assault, sexual harassment and all that sort of stuff. And so I don't like being perceived as a female, even though I identify as female, because it's just a safety measure. and like I don't like getting into functions. I really only have to do it if I have to, like and I get into arguments about gender equality and transgender rights and all that all the time.
So hypothetically, right? So if sexuality is a gender-based thing, right? And if you're a biological male going out with another biological male that recognizes themselves as female, is it still a gay relationship?
It's a heterosexual relationship. If someone, say I'm dating a guy, that guy, if he identifies as someone who only dates women, he is still straight if he dates me. It's the same if a female dates a male to female transgender man. That is considered a straight relationship.
Okay, so as, say, gender non-binary, would you say potentially like that like because you used to say to me that you're pansexual, right? So
yeah.
You can go either way, right?
But I prefer personality over genitalia.
Yeah. So like as non-gender binary, do you feel as if like say the whole identity of what like a bi person would be compared to a pan person is based on your gender?
No, bisexuality and pansexuality similar, but it also, they can mean the same thing. It really depends on your personal preference.
I feel like it's an identity.
Yeah.
If you identify with that label, then you do, but if you identify...
I know bisexuals who identify as bi because they're attracted to the same sex and other sexes. They're like, it's, yeah. And yeah. So, same with pansexuals. Like, pansexuals are pretty similar. In some pansexuals, they don't have a gender preference, some do. Yeah.
So when it comes to intersex, what is your views on intersex?
I love intersex people. They are great people. It's kind of complicated because of science, but it's really up to their personal preference on how they identify. If they identify as female, they're female. If they identify as male, they're male. Like, if they identify as just intersex, they're intersex. Like, it's the biological non-binary thing. Like, it's, yeah.
Alright, cool. What about, okay, so hypothetically, if there's a biological two-gender thing, right, and then as a feeling there's over 90 plus fucking genders, right?
Yeah.
So, explain, like, your kind of take on that. With pronouns and stuff like that, him, her, they, whatever.
So, with
X, Y,
the gender binary, there is technically more than, well, with the sex binary, because sex and gender are different. The sex binary is actually on a spectrum as well, because you can be born male or female, and like a male can be born with XX chromosomes and a female can be born with XY chromosomes. There's also a bunch of different chromosomes like XXY, XYY, triple X, single X, like there's a whole variety of that, so we've got to take that into consideration as well.
So these chromosomes potentially creates gender is a behavioural thing. So these chromosomes, because your hormones do create your behaviour somewhat.
Yeah.
So would that potentially be like a different gender because of the different type of behaviour?
It's a different sex. People who have different chromosomes, say it was a male who had XX chromosomes, that would technically make me intersex. So there's that. Gender is what you feel in your mind, like what you think and what you feel, and sex is what you were assigned at birth. A lot of intersex people, as at birth and as a child are forced to do hormone replacements and have a bunch of surgeries to correct the abnormality when intersexuality has been around for a while. Been around since humans were created. And yeah.
Fair. So, hypothetically, I mean, this is just my kind of talking, but if the DNA strain is both masculine and feminine, right, and intersex people are both masculine and feminine, would that technically be the third sex?
Technically, yes.
But gender is another construct.
Gender is a social construct that is created by societal rules and norms that as a society we push for. Take the 1950s. A lot of women stayed home, and before that, in World War II, when the men went off to war, the women had to work. Like, it's very much a social contract. Like World War II, the social norm was for women to work while the men were away. In the 1950s, the social norm was for women to stay home and take care of the children in the house.
Okay. So do you feel like as we go into the 21st century, or more into the 21st century, do you feel like there's more, not only awareness, but more acceptance of someone who is potentially like yourself? Or do you think there's always going to be some form of hate?
That's a yes and no question. I believe, yes, the world is becoming more accepting, but there'll always be a small portion of human beings that will have this huge amount of hate on transgender people, on queer people, on intersex people. Like, it's not going to go away anytime soon. And until those people, the only way for those people to stop their hate is for them to educate themselves and to basically go to therapy.
So hypothetically, if we're evolving as a species, and we're learning about more gender awareness, politics and stuff like that, do you think hypothetically not only will we have new genders in the future, but we'll also have new sexualities?
Yes, I believe that we'll have new genders, new sexualities. 2019 to 2021, like there's been a couple of new sexualities. Polysexual is a new one. Demisexual, or polysexual. Which one do you want to know about?
I was thinking Sappho similar to Demi.
So someone who's Sappho is a woman or a non-binary person who's feminine presenting, who loves women. Polysexual are like pansexual, they love all genders, but they do have a gender preference. Demisexual people only have sex once an emotional connection is formed.
Alright, so last question. Okay. So if you were to speak to someone who's struggling with possibly their own identity or their own sexuality, what would be the advice to give to them?
Take your time, figure it out, and if you have to, go to therapy, and maybe that will help you out. Like, it's coming out or coming in, as a lot of people are now referring to it. It's a person by person thing. Like, my experience is going to be different to the next person, and the next person's going to be, like, it's a very different form, like, coming out stories. Some can be similar, some are extremely different, and like, it's going to be hard.
Dope. So any wise words of wisdom?
Don't be too hard on yourself. Be who you are, as long as it is safe to do so. Do not put yourself at risk of being hurt, both emotionally, financially, physically, sexually. Like, do not risk your person, like, just take care of yourself first. If it is not safe to come out, or if it's not safe to do, or to act how you want to act, or dress how you want to dress, don't do it. It is, like, I know it's pretty backwards, but it's for your safety. Like, you could get murdered. Like, that's the easiest way to put it. Like, if it is not safe to do so, the worst case scenario is that you get murdered. So, and just stay safe.